Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Speak from the Heart, testimonial podcast series where athletes speak about their journey and their faith behind it. And today I have the quarterback for the University of the Las Vegas Rebels, Alex Orji. So, welcome to the show, man. I'm super excited to have you on.
That's Bredesen, number 44. Watch him come in motion. Orji keeps. Orji in. Touchdown. Takes the snap. He'll look to throw. He steps up in the pocket. He'll run it himself. He's got some space at the 10. He cuts it inside the 5.
So, man, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so give me some of your background. You grew up in Saxe, Texas, and football in Texas is a different animal. I mean, you got mid-major Division One like stadiums and just absolute elite talent in high school. So, what was your upbringing like? How did that environment shape who you are today, and why did you choose football?
Yeah, for me, I grew up as the third of three boys. So I have two older brothers. One of them's 3 years older than me. The other one's 4 years older than me. And initially, growing up, just having two Nigerian parents, the main focus was always just doing well in school and trying to be the best people we could always be, being well behaved and, just being those kids that other parents brag on and that they're not always saying are a problem.
Yeah,
And then I think for me, I was like 3 or 4 years old when my middle brother started playing football. Or I guess he had been playing, and me and my oldest brother, we had just been going to his practices, hanging out on the side like brothers do, and stuff like that, and watching. Um, and it got to a point where we just, we wanted to get in on the action and we wanted to play. So for me, it's been a large majority of my whole life, just having been playing football and from there, we've become somewhat of a football family, and it's been a really big part of our lives. But yeah, just having two Nigerian parents and them really focused on the things that are important in life, that not things that we think are important, but that we know are important. From a young age, they kind of set the example more than just instilling in us the idea of giving back and helping people, and not only how important it is, but how good it can make you feel. So it's somewhat of a, self-reward that young people, especially young children, look for. Being able to go back to Nigeria and visit, my dad's village and my mom's family, and just see the way that different people live. So I think that also having that different kind of perspective and appreciation for the things we have back home wasn't it was something that was kind of somewhat innate for us
yeah,
as children. I guess more inherent, and it was a really big part of growing up. Like you said, I grew up partially in Saxe, Texas. We really grew up in Rockwall, Texas, which is about 30 minutes away, both east of Dallas. And for my brothers, it was pretty constant. We played football in Rockwall as well as like the Dallas area. And so that kind of helped with our well-roundedness, if you will, or versatility
yeah,
enough. And for me, I ended up grew up in Rockwall, went to school there for 9 years, I guess, up till my freshman year of high school. And then my sophomore year, I transferred to a private school in South Dallas. Just needed to change the scenery. My parents, especially my dad and I, wanted to switch things up as far as just like on the school side of things. And I went there. Very different, a lot more structured than the public school I was at. And then after only a semester there were some things going on between like our commute getting to school, the school itself, and kind of the administration there, and just all things considered, and we ended up moving to like Rowlett, Saxe area. And this is when my brothers were both already in college. So moving was a little bit easier. So it was just my mom, my dad, and I. And I went to Saxe and finished my sophomore year and then junior and senior year there.
I gotcha. Okay, yeah. So how is it kind of being the little brother? Like, I'm sure that did you compete with your brothers a lot growing up?
Yeah, definitely difficult, especially just us being us. We're kind of bigger, always been bigger kids. So a lot of the times, whether it be, playing games, race, running, whatever it be, like, playing outside, stuff like that. If we could all be on the same team, I was all for it. As soon as we start going up against each other, I'm like, it's not fair. And I was like, I just can't wait till I'm your size. And then I would say probably around for my freshman year of high school is when I got like kind of caught up as far as size. But at that time, I was like 6'2", 200 pound receiver and quarterback, and they're like linebackers getting ready to go play in the SEC. So
Yeah.
there's still a disparity there. So I never really caught up. And then by the time that, I was really around the same size as them, kind of caught up ish strength wise,
Mm.
really had no motivation to kind of get back at them. But yeah, growing up, they definitely, whether they were fighting around the house or, you know, running, playing ball, whatever it may have been, did what I could to compete. But, there was definitely a size gap there.
Yeah. I'm sure that helped with your competitiveness and like just the desire to win. Because I mean, I grew up with a little brother too, and I wanted to beat him in everything that I could, and I think that made him want to beat me even more because he saw the fire that I had to try to beat him. But I'm
For sure.
sure that that helped you. I mean, you became a 4-star athlete coming out of high school.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the recruiting process. What did that look like for you, and how did you handle those expectations and attention? And did you have any like pressure placed on yourself at that time?
Yeah, I think it was definitely interesting and unique as everybody's is. But for me, um, coming out of middle school, going into high school, I had been playing quarterback for years at this point, and our varsity high school coach came and talked to me, talked to my dad, and he just asked if I'll be comfortable with playing receiver on varsity or if I wanted to play quarterback on the freshman team. And for me, I it felt like I didn't really know at the time how much of a split road what decision that would be, but I think it's kind of guided who I've been in my life since then. And when he asked that question, it sounded like varsity receiver versus freshman quarterback. But kind of what I heard was help the team win on Fridays or help myself on freshman team or JV, whatever it may have been.
Mm-hmm.
And in that instant, made a pretty quick decision, and I was ready to, play varsity and try to contribute to something that was bigger than myself. So I played receiver. My brother was a senior on the team, so that was actually the only year that I got to play with one of them. Um, and then we had a 4-star quarterback that was also a senior named Jacob Clark. He ended up going to Minnesota, who was also one of my good friends. And then junior receiver, some people know Jackson Smith and Jigba. And so we had, a pretty good team, and it was fun being able to, kind of see the field from a different perspective, but also be able to, help where I could, whether it may have been kind of blocking from the slot or just feeling things a little bit differently from somewhat of a quarterback's perspective, even though, I didn't really know much from that position. But it was a fun year of football. But I knew that after that season, I was ready to go back to playing quarterback, get back where I was comfortable and where I felt like I wanted to be. And that was right around the same time that my dad had decided to put me in private school. So I go to a private school. They also already have a quarterback, and um, we went and competed, but didn't have a lot of guys on the team. So it ended up being somewhat of a shallow competition. And once again, I'd already chosen who I wanted to be, and I was ready to help the team. So I went and played free safety for the whole year. Ended up in certain games playing safety, corner, quarterback, running back, receiver, whatever the team needed. And again, tons of fun, but also learning football from more perspectives than just the backfield and just inside the pocket. I think it was the spring of my freshman year, so before I left for the private school, actually, that I thought that I got my first offer. It was interesting because the varsity coach at Rockwall my freshman year. Um, we got on the phone with the coach from Arkansas. I think it was the receivers coach from Arkansas, and he ended up offering me on the phone. And he asked if I had any other offers at this point or if they were the first ones. And I was super excited, almost speechless. And I was like, yeah, y'all are the first ones, which is interesting because Arkansas was the first offer my family had ever received. And they were the first ones to offer my oldest brother.
Wow.
So I thought it was kind of the same thing going on. And then our coach was sitting there. He was kind of on the phone with me on speaker, and he kind of, gestured me not to say anything too quickly. And then when we hung up the phone, he let me know that Baylor had actually offered me, at that point, it must have been 7 months ago. It was, I think the summer, like the end of the summer before my freshman year. But for whatever reason, he didn't let me know. And so I ended up finding out, and it kind of felt like or looked like I got two offers, my first two offers on the same day.
Hmm.
Uh, and then from there, it was pretty slow once I got to the private school and all that. Um, I guess kind of a lot of questions around what I wanted to do and where I would be and things like that. And, just the lack of, didn't have like a ton of film from even playing receiver. And then also talking to coaches, them asking, knowing that I wanted to play quarterback, but I'd only played receiver at a high level. And I get to the private school, take some visits. I'm playing during the season. I ended up getting, I think it was like Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas Tech with like in the beginning of the season. And at this point, a lot of guys are offering me to play, just athlete and figure it out later. Um, and then throughout that year, and then my junior year, I transferred to Saxe High School after we moved to that area. And I got back to playing quarterback. Looking back, I didn't think it was a really good year playing football, but it was my first year starting at quarterback, so I guess I'll give myself some grace.
Hmm.
It was again a ton of fun, new place, new team, new coaches, new classmates, everything. And I think it was just being able to put things on tape, and I ended up getting a majority of my offers during or like toward the end of that season. Um, in which at that point I felt like I set my eyes on. I think it was like TCU, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Nebraska, and ended up narrowing it down kind of towards spring ball before my senior year. And um, my top schools were TCU, Virginia, Virginia Tech. And then really late, I guess, in the recruiting process, my last offer was in March of 2021. I'm in like English class and I'm getting a call from a random number and ended up being ended up my high school head coach at the time at Saxe texted me and was like, hey, answer the phone. Jim Harbaugh's trying to call you. And I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about, but I'm gonna ask the teacher if I can take a call outside. I ended up talking to Coach Harbaugh on the phone for a little while. Anyone who's ever met him knows that he can never just talk about one thing, even if it's his first time meeting you or whatever it may be. So it was a good conversation, and I felt like I was kind of torn because I was pretty close to committing and figuring out really what I wanted to do and locking in somewhere. And to be honest, I didn't really feel like I wanted to open up a new can of worms and give Michigan a light of day.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably 2 weeks after I got the Michigan offer, I ended up committing to Virginia Tech anyway, without really thinking too much about Michigan. Um, and I was committed to Virginia Tech for 9 months, and everything was great. I thought, I was going to be the next Mike Vick or Tyrod Taylor, whatever it may be, and start trying to, build a class of guys to go to Virginia Tech with. And I thought it would be
Yeah.
really great. And then toward the end of my senior season of football, Coach Fuente, who was at Virginia Tech, got fired. And for me, I didn't really commit to a coach. I committed to the team, the program, university, whatever it may have been.
Mm.
And that's just kind of how my family had always done things. You give somebody your word, you keep that word,
Yeah.
regardless of what somebody else does or whatever happens. So at the time, it's like, didn't really matter. I was going to still go to Virginia Tech, try to keep all the guys from decommitting, flipping, whatever it may have been. And it got to a point where it felt like I wasn't really getting recruited to go there anymore. Not that like they wanted me, but it seemed like they just thought that I was locked in no matter what, and they didn't have to recruit or talk to me, the new staff. So I ended up reevaluating. I took a late visit to Michigan. There was actually nobody on campus except like the coaches and a few players who didn't go home because it was right after their first, like the first Big Ten championship a
Hmm.
few years ago, and it was freezing. I mean, it wasn't super cold, but it was way colder than Texas. And I didn't fall in love on the visit. I thought it was cool. I thought the opportunities for life after football were elite. Um, I didn't think that there was a whole lot of opportunity for me to play early. And in my head, when I got off the plane, I was like, I'm probably still going to go to Virginia Tech, but I'm glad that I gave that the light of day that it deserved.
Yeah.
And then throughout the weekend, I knew that I had to make a decision quick because I was ready to graduate in December, and I took the visit on like the 10th. Signing day was like the 15th. So I was ready to figure it out quick. Um, I ended up talking to my whole camp, everybody in my world, I guess, my parents, my brothers, my coaches, God, and just trying to figure it out. I ended up talking on the phone with Mike Vick at some point, and it was interesting because I was put on the phone with him to try to recruit me to go to Virginia Tech, I assume, but he kind of just told me to do whatever I felt was important.
Mm.
Like I partially wanted to go there to kind of follow along in the legacy that he started of, dual threat quarterbacks who can do it all and make plays, this and that. And he kind of slowed me down and was like, when I did that, Virginia Tech didn't have that history. So I couldn't sit here and tell you to do it when I didn't even do it myself.
Yeah.
And just thinking about everything, I ended up wanting to go to Michigan. I think it was just really a ton of prayer the night before, honestly. And Virginia Tech still hadn't hired an offensive coordinator at the time. They put me on the phone with the guy who they thought would likely get the job. Um, but at the time, it didn't really feel like it was just a football decision. So I was confident with it because I knew no matter what, uh, the fact that I prayed on it and that I placed it as a priority, but also uh, knew that I wasn't just going somewhere for football or, anything trivial. I knew
Yeah.
that I could make a wrong decision. And that's how I ended up at Michigan. I early enrolled and then kind of started to get to know the guys in my class. And I think to this day, I think it was the right decision.
Yeah. And looking back um, on that 2023 national championship, I mean, you're a national champion.
Hail, hail, Michigan. They are the champions of college football 2023.
Took counsel from God, the Holy Spirit, this team, everybody, unanimous support for each other. I ain't got a question, but my dad does.
Jen, a question if I might. Who has us? No!
Yeah.
And looking back on that season, what was that experience like, and how did God shape you and shape your heart through humility and kind of just waiting?
Yeah, I think that season taught me a ton, as I think it taught a ton of like everyone else on that team. And God definitely played a huge role in it. He was basically as important as, the ship of, he was as important as the captain is to a ship, as a pilot is to a plane. He was
Mm-hmm.
everything for me that year. Even though at the time I feel like I probably didn't know it. That year really taught me the true meaning of being a champion day in and day out. I think a big kudos to Coach Harbaugh on that kind of
Yeah.
frontier. He put those thoughts in our head and also kind of molded us into not being who he wanted us to be or what it just took to win, but young, process oriented men of God who put the important things first. We were big into process orientation that year of just knowing that the things that are important are important. They're going to come first, but also if we just focus on a result, we'll never get to that result. So for us, it was basically the 5 days leading up of practice were more important than the games. And then on the games, we just went out and did whatever we did and took care of business. But it was more than just, practice, obviously. What goes into a finished product every week of performing at a high level. It was showing up on time, going to class. It was all the important things that a lot of people look over and don't really care about. But that's what made us the team that we were, the players that we were, but also the men that we were. That team was some of the greatest guys that I've ever been around, guys that I'll, be friends with and family with for life, but not just because we won together, because we were cool or shared, like mindsets, but because we did the important things together, and we chopped wood and carried water, and we,
Mm,
did the stuff that nobody likes. And now we have the same mindset of knowing that discipline breeds excellence, and knowing
yeah.
that discipline is the most important thing that you can have as a man.
Yeah. And I like how you said that, like you mentioned going to class and going, like being at practice on time, all that stuff. Like I feel like being a winner in every aspect of life will eventually help you to be a winner on the field. And a lot of
Yeah,
the time, it's kind of like a joke that some guys have said. It's like, I didn't come here to play school. Like I came
right.
here to play whatever sport you're playing. And it's
Mhm.
funny, sometimes, but in reality, like that discipline, it's not eyewash to hear it from a coach or, a leader. Like go to school, go to class, like make sure that you're putting in the work and being disciplined. Like that's going to carry to every aspect of your life. So that was cool that you said that, because I completely agree.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you've gone through lots of change. You were
Mhm.
a high school standout in Texas, national champion at Michigan, and now you transferred and you're stepping into a new chapter at the University of Las Vegas. So how have those transitions shaped you, not just as a quarterback or as a football player, but as a man?
Yeah, I think that first thing, as soon as I became a college student athlete, was our strength coach at Michigan, who's with the Chargers now with Coach Harbaugh. Probably one of the most impactful people I've met in my life, just as far as building me into who I am, but not necessarily creating me. I think that my parents did an exceptional job of what how they raised my brothers and I. I think that them trusting me in Coach Harbaugh and Coach Herb's hands was a great decision, because he built on what they already established. He let us know that the future favors those who press on. He had a bunch of different sayings that everyone from those teams would be able to recite in a heartbeat, but they really do stick and land with you because of who he is. And when you first meet him, you may think that he's the craziest guy in the world or the most mellow man you've ever met. Just depends on what day of the week it is, what time it is. But
Yeah,
if you spend any type of extended time with him, you know why people talk about him the way that we do. He just gave us a different type of mindset of, like I said, pressing on and just keep on going, and don't worry about what decision you make. Just make it 100%. And then also just like not caring and not worrying about things you can't control or things that are unimportant and things like that, but focusing on, the things that lead to the results that you desire, or, focusing on things that you can control, and, how hard you do something or how hard you work. And then also tying that in with, the two-headed dragon of him and Coach Harbaugh. Like I said, Coach Harbaugh just taught us to be a champion every day, but also knowing that that wasn't everything, because it wasn't just being a champion of college football or of football in general, but also being a champion in life, and just knowing that he was like the biggest glaring example of faith, family, and football that I've ever seen. Obviously, everybody knows the Harbaugh last name through football, but like
yeah,
Coach Jim Harbaugh, he has like 9 kids that are always, the little ones like Jack and Johnny, like they're always running around the facility, always
mm,
around. His daughter was at the school at the time while we were making our national championship run, and it's like his dad was always around. Like he was the ultimate family man, who was also like you can talk. Him and John Gruden in a room would be elite just to learn football. Like
mm,
talk about two football guys, and then
yeah,
Faith, like he really was a catalyst in our team chapel. It was something that was important to him, and he wouldn't just say it and not show up because he has all these head coach things to do, but he would be in there. He's attentive, and he was a great example of, if he'd always say, if you want to get a little bit better, you work a little bit harder. And it was like, you want to grow a little bit closer to God, get a little bit of the word. And he was an example of that. He never missed chapel. He would always, talk about it just as much as he would talk about, showing up to meetings, showing up to practice. It was just something that was at the top of his list. You could tell that it was important to him. So faith, family, and football is extremely important to him, and he bestowed that upon a lot of us.
yeah,
Uh, then coming to UNLV, making the decision and kind of the transition and everything was somewhat of a humble awakening in the way that it's just, you never really think about things that may happen until they're about to happen to you. Um, and it kind of taught me that move and change are inevitable because no matter how my career would have played out at Michigan, at some point I was gonna, pack up my apartment and go somewhere else, whether it be just to continue life, to play football somewhere else, to go to the next level, whatever it may have been. So I can't say, how much I appreciate this happening at the timing that it did, especially because I know that it was what God wanted to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and then from a spiritual standpoint, I feel like I'm spiritually peaking every single day. Even before I got here, I met the most important person that I've met since I've been here, which was Randall Cunningham. And if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would meet him and be close with him, I would have never thought that it would have nothing to do with football. But
Yeah.
he called me, we talked ball a little bit, and once he figured out that I was coming here, and I'm like shell shocked, like frozen, speechless on the phone, like I'm talking around Cunningham right now, like this is nuts. And it got to a point where we stopped talking about football and just started talking about our faith and my journey and my walk and who I am, um, which was refreshing at the time because I was like, I don't really get to talk to a lot of people about this, especially not a lot of football guys, but now looking back at the past 12 months of having been knowing him, um, he's an elite pastor, an elite disciple of Jesus and evangelist and just, spreader of the good news and the gospel. And he's been a great leader and example for me and mentor, guidance, all the above, just because not only is he the pastor of our church, but uh, he and his wife are like the mother and father of our church, and they really do a good job of cultivating, a family aspect within the church and making sure that we all, know each other, that we're all, fellowshipping together and things like that. And it's just been such a big year of spiritual growth for me, to where I feel like I wake up every day and I don't have to sit there and question who I want to be because I know that every day that I'm going in Christ. And like I said, I'm spiritually peaking, every day. And
Yeah.
then just living here and being on my own. It's really my first time living alone since my brothers moved out and left for college. But even then, I was obviously still living with my parents. It's been a lot of growing up, a lot of, super real things, especially, me getting hurt, another thing that's just like, it's easy to put a question mark by it and ask the, why me and things like that. But, maturing came with realizing that even if I'm upset with a, current situation, you got to find a way to still get the things done that are important and, keep pressing, like I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Uh, and then obviously living in Vegas, like networking is an all-time high, something that was been super important to me since I committed to Michigan. And from a football aspect, learning from Coach Mullen and Coach Dennis has been extremely elite. And then also building a connection with Urban Meyer through the two of them has been great and something that I just never would have thought would happen, especially from a Michigan guy like me. Uh, and then my boy Anthony Calandria, who's another quarterback here, he's been a big part of just kind of my development and growth as not only a person, but just kind of a football guy and being able to, relate and communicate with different people on the team and just kind of soaking up kind of the energy that he has and, bringing the same fire to work every day that he does.
Yeah. And you've talked about some like really influential people, um, and people that kind of help you in your walk with Christ, not just as being an athlete, but as a Christian as well. So, um, and you mentioned how kind of like you have you have a spiritual, peak, uh, every day as you continue out through your career. And that just kind of makes things easier, in my opinion. Like you're
Sure.
confident in who you are and what Jesus has planned for you, and kind of the road that you're traveling. It becomes a little bit easier, and the things that you may experience you're less likely to question, because you know that it's either adversity that will make you into the man that he wants you to be,
Right.
or something that may turn you away to either test your faith or see if you really want this. So talk about let's go into that a little bit more. Was your faith always central in your life, or was there a moment in your relationship with Christ that became personal and real for you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, like growing up, always had like faith leading parents and a praying grandma. So it was always there. And there were times in my life that it hasn't always felt like it was, like a flat line and then a great increase at some point, or that it was, a constant improvement. It was up and down and very mountainous, as I think a lot of people's walks are, because, early on as a kid, there's not a whole lot of temptation and a whole lot of, opportunity for problems to arise or for you to make mistakes. But there's definitely times when you look back and you think, like, whether it be high school, freshman year of college, throughout college, you feel you were straying away and that you didn't really put God as a priority. You kind of took his mercy and grace for granted. I think that there was a certain point in my life, I believe my sophomore year when I was at the private school, there was a motivational speaker that came to the school, talked to the football team. I think it was in the summer. And he started asking people why they love football. And a lot of guys didn't necessarily have an answer besides, I love it because I love it, or I love it because I've always played it, or I love it because I want to go to the league and I want to take care of this person and that person. And I didn't want to just say that unless it was the real sole reason that I wanted to play. And I couldn't sit there and say my reason had always been the reason, but that day I decided that it was. And my reason for playing football since then has always been that the moral coding and traits and tendencies that football builds are one super essential to, I think, cultivating, a championship lifestyle and everything that you do. But also football was going to be my bridge into doing what I really want to do, which is just talking about God in every way that I can. So especially playing quarterback, a lot of the cameras and lights are pointed your way. And for me, I just always thought of that as a great opportunity to spread the good news, talk about the gospel, talk about what God has done in my life and how much he's impacted me. And then hopefully just do whatever I can to recruit people to heaven and get people on Team Jesus. Which I'd say, I can't sit here and ever look in the mirror and say that, God is failing me, because that's what I always wanted to do. And I mean, people like you right now, you're just giving me the opportunity to do it. So if I sit here and say that, football was quote unquote taken away from me this season, but I was still able to focus on goal number one, then there's no part of this season of life for me that was a failure, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah. And I talked to my parents a long time ago when things weren't going my way at Eastern Kentucky. Um, obviously, I think the goal of a lot of athletes is you want to go to the league, you want to go to the next level, you want to play professionally, you want to get that opportunity. And honestly, I had a conflict with myself, and I was like, I was worried that I was running out of opportunities. I was there for 2 years. I got two at bats. So I'm like, dang, I'm not going to be, looked at. And, junior year is kind of like the year that good players get signed or drafted or get that opportunity to go to the next level. And, I'm going to be at my junior year with little to no experience. So I remember my mom telling me that, you know, baseball is your platform to spread the gospel. And the only reason that I think that you would make it is because one, it's God's plan for you, but two, to bring others to the kingdom. So
Sure.
I think with the platform thing, I mean, you have a great opportunity. We got social media, we have, we get to talk to people every day
Right.
with those connections, that networking, and to really present yourself as a Christian, but not only as a Christian, but as an athlete in every other aspect of your life.
Yeah.
And, get that opportunity to, you know, pour into somebody that may not know who Christ is, or may not have the opportunity in their life to know who Christ is. So, and another good thing is, like, someone's first impression of Christ may be from you.
Right.
So whatever you do, how you carry yourself, that's also super important. And just getting people. That's the main goal. Is recruiting people on Team Jesus, like you said. That's the only reason why we're here, is to bring others to Him,
Yeah.
and to walk like Jesus did, and to live like Him, and heal this world as best we can. So yeah, I think that was super good by you. I think that was a good explanation.
I appreciate it.
All right, so you briefly mentioned being a quarterback. The pressure is constant. You're the absolute heart of the offense, and sometimes the team. Media, teammates. You got lots of expectations from all of them, and including the fans. So, I mean, how did your faith help you with the pressure when maybe things aren't going your way, or you got tens of thousands of eyes on you?
Yeah, for me, initially it was definitely tough, especially I'll say my freshman and sophomore year. I mean, freshman year was it's like nothing, freshman year is low pressure. No one expects you to really do much, especially with us having JJ on the team and everyone knowing that once he took the starting job that it was his till, he left. Sophomore year, there was almost a weird sense of pressure for me to just be the backup, which you think is so insignificant, but there was so much pressure just for me to, go out there and perform and make sure that whenever it is time for JJ to leave, then there's no doubt that I'm the next guy up, which I didn't think that I really did throughout that season, through different ups and downs. I struggled with feeling like I wasn't doing enough to get the result that I desired, even though I felt like my process was on point and I was doing the necessary things that I needed to do. It just wasn't enough. And then weirdly, as soon as JJ, we won the national championship, and there were slight murmurs of JJ going into the draft. And once he put his name in, um, people just all of a sudden started looking at me like, what am I going to do? Because I'm next up and this and that. And for me, it was somewhat of a shocker. It was something that I didn't think I was ready for because ending the season, I wasn't the second string or the third string, honestly. But everyone just immediately turned to me, and I gained like 50,000 followers in a day. And I'm sitting here like losing my mind, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then it took me kind of a second to realize that it was kind of everything that I asked for. And if nothing else happened to me from that day on, you know, I could spread the word to people who were, this is their first impression of me. Um, and so for me, I kind of started to realize that no matter what people were saying, uh, I knew that I was more than an athlete. I knew that I was more than just a quarterback or a football player in Michigan Wolverine. Um, and there were hints of that I had to kind of hone into from high school because, like you said, Texas high school is a different beast. And you go out there and you don't play well, then, people want to make you a 1 star or 2 star, and people want to, say that you don't deserve this offer or that offer. And so I was exposed to it early. And once I kind of got into a bigger spotlight, then it definitely was amplified. And then going into the season, there was so many questions of why they hadn't announced that I was a starter out of spring ball or why they didn't say it out of fall camp. And then we go out there for game one and I'm not taking the first snap. And it's tough when it's strangers and people you don't know. It's a little bit harder whenever it's people that are kind of in your inner circle, like teammates or people that are in the building. And then once it's family and friends and people that, you go to confide in and get away from football, then that's when it becomes, like who do I even have, to talk
Mm.
to? And then from there, I kind of had to realize that, like I said, I'm more than an athlete, but I also have unwavering confidence that whatever's going on in my life is directly placed on me from God and His will. And that just because, I'm not starting this game, that doesn't mean that I'm worthless, or that doesn't mean that I'm not enough for Him, or that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not doing enough. And like I said, me not starting at the time was simply a result, but I knew that my process was something that was conducive of good results, and that was, a good process to get me where I wanted to be. All external factors may not have guided me in that direction at the time. And I think it was the fourth game of the season. I made my first start, barely even threw the football, still received criticism for that game. And it didn't affect me because I knew that, when the game ended, I knew who they were going to talk to, point the cameras and microphones and lights at. And I knew that that was when my game started. And I had an opportunity to, in front of all these people and Fox or whatever game was broadcasting or whatever station was broadcasting our game, that I could look in these cameras and tell them how good God has been to me and tell them how I got to this point in my life. And no matter how good or bad I did, that his love is unconditional, and let them know, what's important, that I'm studying my playbook, but not as much as I'm, studying my Bible, and that, you know, whatever it is, whatever people say, it didn't affect me too much because I knew that I was a child of the Most High. And at the time, it kind of felt like I was, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, like sitting in just fire and a bunch of people around me, and they're turning up the heat. And for me, I was just had to find a way to stay calm. And that calmness came from Jesus sitting in there with me. And those are like reading through Daniel covers two of my favorite stories.
Mm-hmm.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, and then obviously Daniel in the lion's den right here. I mean,
Yeah.
those two stories, they mean so much to me, not only because I heard them so much, growing up and through Bible study or, Sunday service and things like that. But once I really realized the meaning of them, and there was a certain point in my life where it went from, you grow up and you hear about things like that and Father Abraham and Jesus' birth. And at some point, it's really no different than the storybooks that you read at school and
Yeah.
fiction. And then it gets to a point where you really realize that these things happened and these people walk the same earth that we do today. And, getting thrown into a den of lions and not even getting a reaction out of them and them not even trying to, eat. And they're starving, they're huge. And like, it really lets you know what's real and what's not,
Yeah.
because that doesn't happen without a God. That doesn't happen without Jesus going and protecting Daniel. And same with the fiery furnace. Like, it literally killed the guards that threw them in there, but they were unsinged, didn't even smell like smoke.
Mm-hmm.
All know about the fourth man in the fire. And for me, when it felt like I was in that fire, even at the time, I still didn't quite know it, but he was right there with me. And
Yeah.
it got to a point where I knew that there was nothing I could do on a Saturday that would define me as a person unless I started falling short on the things that were important to me, which were who I am as a man, who I am as a son of God.
Yeah. That's awesome that you mentioned those stories in Daniel. I actually did a video today on
Really?
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And honestly, you can kind of make that comparison to the media being King Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
They're telling these three guys, like, you're going to bow down and worship this statue that I made, this golden statue. And they're like, no, like, I'm going to worship my God. I'm going to stay faithful to him. And I'm not going to fall under your temptation or your peer pressure to do this because you threatened me with death. And like, honestly, you can look at that the other way of just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then that kind of, hurts you in your moral compass as, how faithful are you? How true are you to your word? Who exactly are you and what do you stand for? And so I think all that's important, especially in the media, you saying that you go back to Jesus and, God and how he has blessed you. And honestly, I feel like that's such a cool answer whenever you see it on the news or post game interview, halftime report, halftime interviews, stuff like that. I always love seeing those. Like, God's got a plan for us. God's got a plan for me. And just pointing everything back to him. Not only does it, I think, honestly, unite people more, but
Right.
also it gives him the glory.
For sure.
And that's just that's really cool. And honestly, it may be hard to do sometimes, especially when things aren't going well, and you're just like, man, I got to do better. I got to do this. I got to do this. This anxiety, this nervousness is, I'm making so many mistakes, or I'm not having a good game or whatever. And I mean, I think it's different with football because you guys play once a week. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's like, so like it's hard. And getting so much time in between those games, you only get certain opportunities. So they may pile on even harder.
Right.
And that's the thing I've realized is like baseball, we play like 4, maybe 5 games a week in college. So it's a long schedule. So I mean, we got short time to kind of redeem ourselves, but football guys don't. Like if you mess up on Saturday, like you don't get the next opportunity until next Saturday. You know what I mean? So I think it's cool that you mentioned that. Giving the glory back to God whenever it's all said and done.
Sure.
And you also mentioned this very briefly. Talk about your season-ending injury at UNLV. How did your faith sustain you through that time, and kind of walk us through a little bit about how it happened and how you handled it initially, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was the third game of the season. At the time, I'd already not been starting again, but obviously a year later was able to handle it a little different, even though it was in different circumstances. I still, rested in God, and like we talked about, just knowing that my performance on the field or whatever happens, throughout the week in the facility doesn't define me as a man or a Christian. And so I thought, the season had been going well. We're winning games, and then during the UCLA game, I had a few plays early. I think it was second quarter, and I'm running the ball. Safety came out of the post and took my knee out. And as soon as it happened, it didn't feel good, but just kind of the way that I am, I was like, no matter what, I got to get up and get off this field. Maybe I'll come out for a play, a few plays, whatever it may be, but however I got to get back in the game and help the team and just be there and be ready, whether we need me short yardage, goal line, whatever. And it happened on their sideline, so I get up and I start jogging off the field. Didn't feel good at all, but just trying to stay as optimistic as possible and confident as possible that everything was going to be okay. I get to the sideline. I'm talking to Coach Mullen, and he's like, talking to me about what happened on the play, this and that, asking if I'm all right. And then I was like, yeah, open field might not be that good right now. I don't know how fast I can run, but short yards, whatever it takes just to, keep the drive alive or get in the end zone, like I'm still here. And then I went to, walk off and put weight back on that right leg, and it felt like my whole leg just collapsed beneath me. The trainers were already nearby, and my boy Cam Frio, another quarterback, he caught me, and we kind of walked over to the tent. We're testing the knee out, everything, and they thought it felt pretty weak on the outside, that it may have been something with my LCL or like posterior corner of my knee. We tried to put a brace on it and hopefully get back in the game, and it just like I couldn't bend it at the time. There was like no stability on the outside. Went and got an X-ray. Everything was clean. Got an MRI the next day. Figured it out. Figured out what it was. Ended up determining that I would need surgery, and that was it for my 2025 season. A lot of emotions went through my head at the time. Just sitting in the doctor's office. My mom was already in town for the game, um, and it was kind of a lot to take in it like all at once. But for me, I sat there and kind of thought, kind of in an instant, what had changed. And that was, Saturdays would be different, even, week to week would be different, but I still have the opportunity to, praise God, spread the word, still have the opportunity to impact guys in the locker room and, try to be a good example for them. Um, and not only that, but earlier this year, Pastor Randall gave a message about how, like adversity and turmoil and different plights in life are an opportunity for you to then overcome them with God and then tell people about how you got through it. Tell people about how he carried you when you couldn't walk and tell people about how good he was to you in your time of need. And for me, like even going back to all the way my sophomore year of high school, my go-to verse has always been 2 Corinthians 12:10, which where it says, for the sake of Christ, I delight myself in all weaknesses, calamities, persecutions, insults, temptation, all these things that everyone would think of as bad. And then Paul continued to, tell the people of Corinth that, for the sake of Christ, when I am weak, then I am strong. And at the time, it was something that it was kind of a placebo at the time. I was trying to trick myself into making it make sense in high school. And I was like, you know what? No matter what it is, something bad happens to me, I'm stronger because of it. And that's when, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger really started to make sense to me. And then as time went on, I really started to realize that when God chooses me to go through something bad, then it's like the ultimate honor because it's a great opportunity for me to lean on him because I'm not getting through any of it without him and on my own. But a great opportunity to lean on him, to talk to Jesus and to get through it. And once you're on the other side of it, now you get to tell all these people about your experience, and anyone who then goes through that same thing, you can be there for them and then bring them to Christ and invite them into the kingdom of God and just let them know like he's going to be there,
Yeah.
the way I thought of it was, like I couldn't really relate or talk to anybody that had been through, an ACL, an Achilles, a season-ending injury, stuff like that. And I couldn't sit there and be like, oh man, you just got to pray about it. You just got to do, and it felt like I'm not connecting with them. Like, who am I to tell them something? I've never been through anything. But now at least I can relate to those guys. And the
Yeah.
more problems and turmoil and things that I go through in my life and tribulations, now once I go through that, it's just a new group of people that I can connect with and that I can, you know, talk to God, like talk to about God. And at the time when it happened, I mean, I didn't really know how to feel. Like I said, my mom was here. My aunt visited in town with one of my cousins. She's like 1 year old, and then my girlfriend was also here. And even with all those people and my dad, one call away, I felt like I didn't really have any physical body to talk to. But there's a song by Maverick City Music called "Talking to Jesus," where it really kind of taught me different ways to pray, but also knowing that like Jesus is truly like omnipresently with me at all times. Like he's right here and I can always pick up the phone and talk to him. And
Yeah.
just be able to have him as a resource and be able to talk to him was a huge part in like my post-surgery and recovery process. And then just also knowing that the true meaning of faith ties directly in with trust. And it's like a different level of trust because people talk about leaps of faith and things like that, but if I really have faith in God and I think that He's faithful to me, then this happening to me, then I know that it's a part of my plan. I don't think that He just rolled the dice and let something random happen,
Yeah.
or it was in the safeties control who tackled me, or our trainers who diagnosed me. It was in none of our control. I have faith and I trust that he knows what he's doing all the time and
Mhm.
that he's not going to let me truly fall without either telling me how to get back up, showing me how, or picking me back up himself. And so that helped me a ton. And then also when I was doing my extensive Bible studies last year, hearing about the story of Job helped me because it's just like helped again with that perspective that was instilled in me from having taken countless trips back to Nigeria and seeing how different people live in different places. Um, yeah, I play college football. I'm able to make NIL money. I'm able to live where I live. I live in Las Vegas. I have a roof over my head, food on my table, and I'm able to get surgery like 7 days after I have an injury. All these things in my life, like I just can't sit here and tell myself that life is that bad, when there's people who didn't even have legs to be injured. There's people who can't complain because they can't speak. There's different things in this life that, when you sit there and not to play like the comparison game, but just to have perspective, like my life could be a lot worse. Like God's been way too good to me, especially for the things that I've done. And it's not like I haven't killed anybody or anything, but like just knowing that how many times that we've not only sinned but transgressed against Him, and that we've fallen into habits of iniquity, but He's still faithful to us. He's still good, and He still gives us the opportunity to, repent and recommit to him. And that just, it helped me so much because now it's like, okay, yeah, I'm sitting at home. Like there were obviously weeks where I couldn't walk or couldn't even, get up on my crutches. And, even just to go to the bathroom was like a full workout and a sweat and things like that. But there was never a time that I could sit there and just honestly look myself in the mirror and say that my life was awful or that everything was falling down on me or that everything was terrible, especially with how many people were reaching out and how much love I was receiving and how present both my parents were in helping me, just through that process. I mean, my dad stayed out here for like a month straight after I got surgery. And it was just, again, like I said, a great opportunity to tell people about how good he is, but also a great opportunity for me to test my own faith and just get stronger, not on my own, but through him.
Yeah. And I thought how cool it was to hear about, the coolest stories that you hear about, especially athletes, is keeping faith in the struggle and faith through adversity. And I also thought it was super cool about how you talked about the perspective. I mean, wow, like there are so many opportunities that you're given that not everyone else does. Like there's some people that don't have enough money to uh, ride the bus to get to school, or even have legs, or they have a sickness that leaves them bedridden. Like I have a good perspective, this good message that there's someone in a hospital bed that wishes on everything that they could be you right now. And that
100%.
perspective is just that's incredible. It grounds you. It really makes you appreciate how blessed you are in your life, and that's a cool perspective from you as well. And I think there's a cool analogy that I heard. It's like the devil is talking to Jesus, and he tells him, you know, I know for a fact that Alex is going to resent you. He's going to be mad at you whenever uh, he gets news that this is a season-ending injury. Like he's not that faithful enough to you, or whatever any circumstance that everyone goes through. Like that person is not going to praise you, or they're going to walk away from you. And then God is like, just like how you talked about with Job. Like God told the devil that he's not going to walk away from me. He's going to stay strong in me. He's going to stay grounded in my faith. And Job, even though he questioned God sometimes, he never walked away from him. And even his questions and his concerns were to God. It wasn't like, to himself. And he always kept that faith. And honestly, that's a really cool um, analogy and story that, we can put perspective on our lives and give us honestly that perspective of being able to stay grounded in our faith no matter what the circumstances are, and to
Mhm.
realize how blessed we are, even though we get so tunnel visioned on
Right.
maybe it be our stats, or how much playing time we get, or how this looks, how does it look if I do this, like will I make it to the league, will I get drafted, will I get signed, like, but we woke up today, like I'm
Right.
healthy today. I can talk to my family members. I have a phone that I can text and call people with. I can drive. I can, like, it's just so many things to be grateful for. And that gratitude just, it, we can sometimes devalue it in a sense. So it's hard once we get so fixated on something, but to just take a couple steps back and look at it as a whole picture is really important. And that's impressive that you were able to do that, because I know that there's a lot of people out there that would really just kind of break down and get angry, question God, why me? Like, this is my year. Why would you let this happen? Why is this your plan for me? And again, trusting in his plan, trusting in his timing. That's also super important.
Yeah.
So wrapping up, what would you say to any young athlete who has faith in God, loves God, but feels maybe overlooked or injured or behind, and is starting to question God's plan for their life and their career? What would you tell them?
Uh, I would say I would ask them like what their priorities are, and I would tell them that whatever sport you're playing, um, the games are short, the seasons are a little less short, and your career overall is, at the end of the day, it's short. But life is long and heaven is forever. So at the end of the day, you kind of have to measure what's super important to you, because if you start to stray away from God, or question him because of something so trivial as your sport or whatever you're doing in your specific endeavor, then now you're losing the bigger picture because of something so minuscule. And then also just having an attitude of gratitude and being grateful for what he has done, and the fact that, he's choosing you. Like, every day that you wake up is him specifically and intentionally choosing you to be a part of his plan and his will for that day. And just knowing that, you got to look back at, like we talked about the story of Job. I would encourage anybody to take, not only read it, but take a deep dive and, watch videos that, break it down and things like that, and kind of figure out how you could compare and apply the different messages from that. And then just putting the pedal to the metal in everything that you do, and just trust that if you're supposed to get there, then he'll get you there. And if you're not, then I mean, he'll take the keys right out of your car and he'll stop you where you're supposed to be, or he'll turn you around. But no matter what, for me, it's just been, just go as hard as you can. And when it's hard to make a decision and you have to make it, then talk to him, pray to him, fast for him, and let him guide you in that decision. And then as soon as you make it and you're on whichever road you're supposed to be on, the pedal's right back to the metal and you're going as fast as you can, as hard as you can, because that's how you get to where God wants you to be, not by tiptoeing and hesitating and, slow pacing and feeling like, okay, well, but people think of this of me, or these people don't respect me enough, or I'm not getting this, I'm not getting that opportunity, or I'm behind. Wherever you are is where he wants you to be. You're never going to be behind or too far ahead or not enough or too much, whatever it may be. It's where he wants you to be, and it's where you should trust that you can rest in and keep faith in everything that you do.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. And a big part of it too is, um, I think that we obviously have free will. We can do whatever we want to do, but when we're grounded in the Lord, and we are devoted to Him and His will for our lives, and have full trust in His plan for us, then things start to align. We start getting
Right.
blessed. We start getting rewarded. When we start falling away, that emptiness fills us. That darkness kind of fills us, and we start going down paths that He might have not wanted us to go down. And I always
Yep.
think of, you know, I don't think this may happen or not, but when we get to heaven, we're at the gates, and God is like, good and faithful servant, welcome home. And you're like, it's, I'm amazed to be here, Lord. I'm so glad that I'm here. And he's like, well, uh, you know, I wanted a different life for you. And he shows you the potential that you had if you trusted his will and followed his plan.
Yeah.
And obviously that won't matter to you as much anymore, but
Yeah.
because, you're in heaven. But it's a cool perspective to kind of look at and be like, I want to live my full, truest life that God has for me and the plan that he has, because there's so many blessings in it. There's so many things that we can take away from it. And also, helping ourselves, helping other people, and, making the most of what we have. Because like you said, our careers are very short, before you know it, I'm going to graduate. Uh, and like, I mean, I got 2 more years left of college ball. So it's hard to kind of process that sometimes. It just felt like I got here, and I'm sure you could say the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's all very true. Just making the most of it, but also trusting in God's plan. Not forcing the action, not trying to do it all yourself, not trying to take the reins and make sure that, press about what the outcome may be, or the future, or anything like that, and just having calm in the present and understanding that the future is in His hands. And I think that you're doing great with that, man. It's really cool to have you on and talk to you about all this stuff. I think your perspective is so mature, and your spiritual maturity also is, and your knowledge is impressive. So it's super cool to have that perspective. And honestly, I feel like in in times where, you may feel that pressure, you may feel that anxiety creep up sometimes. I feel like it's easy to kind of like dismiss it now, because you know that God has a
Right.
plan for you, and the things that we may experience in our lives aren't gonna break us. If anything, we're built for the challenge. We're built for
Yep.
the things that we face, and He's not gonna give you anything that you can't overcome.
Exactly.
So that's it, man. That's all I got. If you got anything else to say, you got the floor.
Just God bless everybody watching this video. Appreciate you taking your time out to listen to just two guys talk about God, but more importantly, giving your time out of your day to learn about God and to hear my story. Appreciate you.
Of course. This has been great, Alex. I really appreciate you having you on, and this has been a great time.
Appreciate you,
So
bro.
thank you all for watching Speak from the Heart, and come back next Sunday for the next episode.